Morning, everybody. So guess I'm talking on a little bit of a sort of left field topic. We know that we need that the growth of SMEs, the growth in SMEs and the growth of SMEs has been pretty stagnant, and also the growth. I think the sort of the transition from informal to formal, not necessarily that's something that we want to necessarily want to push, is also well, we're not tracking that. And I think Neva was pretty clear about, if actually what we need is another 2 million SMEs in our environment if we're going to achieve the kinds of numbers that we want to do. So I know I'm at a research and policy conference. I'm not a researcher and a policy person. I'm actually an implementer. And really what I'm going to be talking is kind of sharing my experience from that perspective. So I'm saying that I really think one of the solutions in ramping up the value and the contribution of SMEs is to change our orientation towards a user orientation. And that requires a little bit of design thinking. So I think a lot of you probably have come across the double diamond of design thinking, which really teaches us to sort of think about convergence and divergence as a process of arriving at solutions. But I want to just talk a little bit about user-centered design, which is actually the core principle of design thinking, which is about putting the user at the center. So user-centered design is a multi-stage problem-solving process that asks of us that we analyze and foresee how users are likely to use a product or a service or a system, and tests the validity of our assumptions. It requires 3 steps: research or discover who is the user, what is their context, what do they want to achieve; empathy, where we put ourselves in the user's shoe, not necessarily to replace a consultative and engagement process with a user; and then iteration or agility, so the constant evaluation and improvement. And in fact, I think the sort of principles of user-centered design is the first is about involving the users in the design process from the start. The second is to clarify the requirements, including the user in the feedback loop constantly, and then following an iterative design process. So fail early in the development cycle, be nimble and agile, and be able to adapt. So a user-centered design process, this is a kind of one of 1,000 graphics that you would find if you went onto the internet to look. Really starts with the question of what is the problem or the challenge or the opportunity or the vision or the need that you're trying to solve for. Really sort of discover and kind of embrace the problem. Bathe in the problem is a phrase that somebody used the other day at a session I was in. Then sort of define the problem and or the outcome that you're trying to achieve. Design and build a prototype, test and validate, deploy, put it out, review, and basically repeat. So we're talking about a cyclical iterative process. This is could be a description of the business process or of the development of a product or a service, starting again with an idea or a need, moving through phases of research and discovery, idea development, prototyping, testing, making changes, retesting, building the best version, going out to market, and then replicating and improving design or increasing ranges. Actually, this isn't necessarily the way a product development or a business cycle will work. In the sector where I work, which is predominantly the creative industries, research and discover probably doesn't really feature. People actually go from idea, thought, product, and make. All the build, prototype, test is in motion. But I think the point is that I'm trying to make is that this is a complex process that can also be quite quick or quite long, and that depends on resources. This, and I might get slapped around a little bit by my friends in the public sector, is a public sector sort of research process and development of policy. Generally quite linear, even if it includes research and user engagement, quite time consuming. And for some of us at the end, in the implementation phase, ties us up into knots around reporting requirements, theories of change, project logic models, evidence, outputs, M&E, etc. And that's not to say that accountability in the work that we do is not important. It's really, where do we need to be accountable, and how do you build in those accountability processes that are useful. So the topic of this session was improving SME participation added in the economy and adaptation to a changing environment. And I think the question I'm really asking is, who needs to adapt and who needs to change, and where do we need to adapt and where do we need to change? And a user orientation gets us to really ask the question, what actually drives business growth and how are we actually supporting it? So I'm going to move a little bit into my experience, our experience in the CDI. I've been running the organization for 23 years, so I have quite a lot of experience in the work. I don't think we called it SME development for a long time. It's enterprise development has become a large part of what we do in our process. But we've developed an approach that where we put the user in the center, and the person in the center is anybody who is wanting to run a business, whether it's informal or formal, whether they're skilled or unskilled. Their ambition and their drive is to generate value and to generate income for themselves or their families. Most of our members actually want to create jobs. They really are driven by a need to create jobs. And this cycle, or this wheel that we use, informs a lot of our processes of engagement with our members. We're a membership-based organization. We have 7,000 members around the country. And it covers all aspects. I don't know if you can read it, but sort of vision, product, production, sales, marketing and distribution, finances, systems and HR, communication and leadership. All elements that it takes for an individual entrepreneur or business owner to drive their business. What we have realized over time is that these don't change. Even as a business is growing in their sophistication, actually the elements required to run and scale up, or just run and manage a profitable business, are the same. What changes is the complexity of the task, the complexity of the environment, and the risk of giving people the wrong environment or making them wait a long time for the support. So we've developed off this foundation projects and programs and activities that we run on an annual basis. The consistency and the depth of how we can run these projects or programs depends on how adept we are at raising the funding, and how good we are at convincing the funders that what we are doing makes sense and is impactful. But we've seen the pattern repeat itself over 23 years, is that actually there are three fundamental requirements an entrepreneur needs or business needs. The products, what is a real sense of what is the product, the value proposition, the service that the business is providing, and the way that grows and changes with increased market access and consumer engagement. And then acumen, the wherewithal as an individual, as a driver, to engage with the ecosystem, with the opportunities, with the challenges that present. You'll notice that none of these really are about access to finance. And it amazes me actually how much of the conversation in the SME support environment focuses on access to finance and hardly mentions access to markets or even product. It doesn't mean that access to finance isn't important and necessary, but it's a catalyst. It's a generator of business activity. And it needs to come in a variety of different forms, in ways that are needed by the entrepreneur at the right time, not in 12 months or 18 months or 2 years down the line. So I can talk for days about what we've done. We have hundreds of case studies that we can talk about, local market access opportunities that catalyze the growth of an informal entrepreneur and drive them into real business activity. Trade and exports that is about 1,000 steps, not a destination. It's a journey that is an ongoing journey for our businesses. Product innovation, an ongoing process of innovation that is in response to market opportunities and customer feedback. And the question here is, again, how do you build the agility of a business owner or business driver to be able to read that market and respond? Innovation support is another activity that we support that is really about the idea and supporting an idea at early stages, sort of pre-commercial stages, which is for a lot of entrepreneurs, that's R&D, that's time, that's resources that don't have access to. And then more lately, over the last sort of decade or so, stimulated a lot with our work with the Jobs Fund, using stimulus grants in catalytic ways to stimulate business growth, to stimulate employment opportunities in business. Again, I could go on. So this is the very messy, sort of complex, iterative, non-linear, just in time, very diverse environment that we work in. I added sector specific because I think that also is missing often in the conversation around SME support and SME development. SMEs aren't generic, they're not homogeneous. They all actually exist in an ecosystem, in a supply chain. And I think that the support really needs to be devised to support them in that environment. So finally, what is the solution? I think the solution, if I'm true to what I'm saying, requires a process of conversation. It requires a process of engagement, of design thinking. But I think the solution, having operated, in fact, as this thing for 23 years, lies in this idea of aggregators and intermediaries. And I think Malebo spoke about it in her introduction about how do we really support the scale up of intermediaries. Quite exactly what she said, but she was referring to the need for aggregators in our environments. And Neva also made reference to building more robust and supportive ecosystems that support enterprises. So I think from a policy perspective, and maybe even from a research perspective, we need to shine more light on this aspect of our ecosystem, because I think the clue to unlocking the sleeping giant that I think is the SME sector in South Africa lies there. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica, and for finishing on time. Our next speaker is Dale Trimble from the University of Cape Town.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dale Trimble. I'm presenting my paper. This paper was published at the University of Cape Town and was in partial fulfillment towards the completion of a master's degree in development policy and practice from the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance. So this paper seeks to understand whether South African businesses are adapting to the demands of the carbon tax policy. I will first explain the objectives of the paper and then give you a brief overview of the carbon tax policy landscape in South Africa and its impacts on businesses in South Africa. Also share key findings and recommendations for practice. A cautionary note that this paper focused on a single case study. My research question is based on the premise set by this quote. The common concern is that carbon pricing could harm business competitiveness. So I set to understand what is the relationship between industrialization and the carbon tax policy, but also wanted to determine whether the carbon tax policy can be both environmentally effective and not negatively impact competition, and also to investigate whether the policy can advance low carbon technology and lower pre-existing revenue motivated taxes. So my journey led me to the wine sector that employs over 250,000 people. To give you an overview, South Africa is part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and a signatory to the Paris Agreement. Globally, South Africa has formulated its climate change ambitions in the Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs for short. The emissions pathway proposed in the NDC is based on the peak plateau trajectory. This means that South Africa has committed itself to stabilizing greenhouse gas emissions by 2025, followed by a decline trajectory from 2030 onwards. Emissions are expected to peak in 2025 and then stabilize, whereby decrease until 2050. This means in practical terms that the country has committed itself to stabilizing greenhouse gas emissions by the middle of the decade, followed by a decline trajectory from 2030 onwards. Now, to help achieve these targets, government has implemented a wide range of policies. However, these policies are not the focus of this paper. We'll be focusing on the carbon tax policy. So the carbon tax policy starts at 120 Rand per ton CO2e and escalates at 2% above inflation annually. The tax gases are emissions covered in the Kyoto Protocol basket. Emissions such as combustion processes and fugitives emissions are also covered. As the policy matures, tax-free thresholds will decrease. So there's 3 scopes for this policy. It's implemented in phases. Scope 1 emissions are considered as direct, as they are all fossil fuels burnt by businesses. Scope 2 emissions are considered indirect, as they are, even though the company is consuming the energy, businesses cannot control it. And then scope 3 emissions are indirect, which are associated with all business activities that support the business operations. Scope 1 emissions started on the 1st of June 2019 and was supposed to end by the 31st of December 2022. However, it was extended till the end of 2025. As you can see on the slide, the policy design and assessment involves the criteria shown here: environmental effectiveness, tax revenues, legislative aspects, technical and administrative feasibility, competitiveness effects, distribution and impacts, and alignment of policy. The 2 criteria relevant to this talk is environmental sustainability and competitive effects. So as mentioned, South Africa is committed to now reducing its greenhouse gas emissions in line with the mandate proposed in the nationally determined contributions. The carbon tax policy was chosen as a pricing mechanism to achieve these targets. However, the policy could be regressive and stimulate price increases within sectors. Distell was a fantastic example of a business directly affected by the carbon tax policy due to its heavy reliance on energy. Globally, South Africa's wine farming standards and production practices are less sustainable than international standards when considering our carbon footprint. This is due to our heavy reliance on fossil fuels to generate power. Within the production of alcohol, the bottling process is a highly carbon intensive because it requires a lot of energy to produce or to pump. Distell is done in long and short. Distell is done with as much as possible to decrease its greenhouse gas emissions. A cautionary note: you'll notice a dip in the graph. That's a dip in greenhouse gas emissions, but that was purely due to COVID. Based on recent findings, Distell has not managed to drop their greenhouse gas emissions, despite them implementing wind farms, solar panels, and even having springs installed to generate power. So based on my research, there would be severe implications on competitiveness within the market, within the wine sector. More so on an international level as the demand for sustainable wines has increased. However, the shift to more sustainable practice here in South Africa is slower. Once Scope 2 emissions are implemented, all Scope 1 emissions from agriculture, which are taxable, will undoubtedly put pressure on all businesses in South Africa, especially businesses like Distell. And this will put pressure on them to increase their prices and thus make them less competitive than companies that produce the same product but reside in countries with less stringent environmental laws. Managing possible impacts on environmental and competitive effects is JET, which will assist by transitioning the country to cleaner energy. And then also with phase 1 still in place and being extended, there's large tax-free thresholds that businesses can capitalize on. So companies who generally move to renewable, in my opinion and in my findings within my research paper, companies are generally going to move to renewable energy sources, not because of the policy, but because of the high cost of energies that is costing businesses to run and so forth. But the strength of the policy is the phased-in approach because it gives businesses a time to adapt to these stringent environmental changes and adapt to their specific markets. However, what I did find is that unlike other countries, South Africa hasn't earmarked these taxes for these carbon tax revenues for any specific purpose. They will form part of the national budget. And this sort of diluting the revenues into general spending also creates a mistrust against the credibility of the policy. And you need trust within the policy, especially with big businesses that feed SMMEs like Distell, who has small holding farms. They're responsible for supplying a lot of for the livelihoods of a lot of people as well. In my conclusion, right, the carbon tax policy, my findings is that it needs to be more stringent in terms of its tax penalties because now business can claim up to 90% within Scope 1. But in the same breath, companies need the support, companies can get that support from the revenues of the carbon tax policy. So if it was earmarked for specific, so sort of tax recycling. So if we generate this amount of money from the wine sector, it goes back into the wine sector to help shift the business into more environmentally friendly ways of operations, mitigation, and adaptation, so forth. My recommendation within my paper was that the carbon tax revenue expenditure be outlined in detail to ensure that it's used for its intended purposes. It should be primarily earmarked for financial environmental reforms, as I just mentioned, reducing the adverse effects on small businesses, and to protect trade-exposed industries and sectors. Long and short, Distell is not meeting the demands of the carbon tax policy. One, because the carbon tax policy is too lax in terms of how they are penalizing businesses. They've extended it by another 2 years now, but at the same breath, they are not earmarking revenues to shift businesses out of a carbon-dependent way of operating. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I just wanted to encourage you to also go on the TIPS website. We've done a number of projects as well as policy papers on the carbon tax and CBAM. Our last speaker is Ndirangu Ngunjiri from University of Nairobi in Kenya.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ndirangu Ngunjiri from the Great Republic of Kenya. I have 60% of the youth. And every Tuesday for the last 2 months, you have what you call Mandamano demonstration, where the youth are demanding good governance in the country. Now, I come from the University of Nairobi. I hope, moderator, these are not my minutes. I'll wait for the presentation to go on. Today, I'm going to discuss about sustainable reporting on the manufacturing firms in Kenya. In Kenya, in the last government regime, we had what we call Big Four agenda. In the Big Four agenda, they were discussing about housing, agriculture, universal health, and manufacturing. The country, Kenya, has 8% contribution manufacturing to the GDP. The government wanted to have what we call 16% contribution to the GDP by year 2030. Currently, we are doing around 9%. And the question was, why are you doing so lowly? And despite that, Kenya, we have a lot of raw materials where you can do a lot of manufacturing. You find we are good farming in coffee, we are good farming in tea, but we export raw material, coffee and tea to UK for processing, then the finished products back to Kenya, whereby even the agriculture farmer himself cannot buy a kg of the coffee. So that we don't drink coffee in Kenya, and we are the farmers because of the cost. So that's why we came up with this paper, so that we can be able to discuss why this reason and what can we make it more better. Yes, manufacturing companies, one thing from the north and from the developed country, Africans were told, oh, because of the comparative advantage, we should not manufacture, we should produce. And that's why we produce raw material and send to the West for them to manufacture and then for us to consume. We find that most of the financial companies don't involve themselves on ESG. They don't care more about the environment. They don't care more about the social and governance of their surrounding, about the environment. They know that just manufacture and sell their products. But now it has come to reality. As manufacturing companies to survive, they need to come with ESG policies in their companies. And this will make even investors to come on board. When the company is listed in the stock market, they need to explain about the ESG policies of the company. And this made, that's how come in this paper, we collaboration with the Capital Market Authority, and we have made it a policy in the country. Every company to come with a policy every year and publish it. Last week, Stanbic Bank, which is the parent company Standard Bank, they published their ESG report. In introduction, for any company to survive, relies so much on profit. But profit is not everything. We need to take care of our environment. We need to take care of the social factors around us, not work so much on the environment. If you can remember when you talk about financial issues, not everything. Remember the Lehman Brothers? They crashed. The growth of financial crisis in 2018 came out of Lehman Brothers crashing. And this made us to really think otherwise. And that's why right now we are thinking about the using of dollar as a common currency. And because of lack of the ESG policies, we brought this economic crisis. More corporations, more firms are becoming more increasingly critical about the negative impact of business operations. You find companies that are able to manufacture, their waste is going to the river, their waste is going to unprotected areas, and this can bring the companies down. They can have court cases. The community can go against them, and this bring the bankruptcy in the companies. They lose value. Most of the people, if a consumer realize how the company is operating, they will not be able to buy those products. If an investor realize how the company is operating, they're not able to invest in that company. So the company lose the value and also the loss of reputation. And when company lose the reputation, the company is done. And there will be a lot of distrust among the stakeholders. Company for financial performance, most on the listed market, rely so much on financial statements, whereby every financial year, at the end of every financial year, we realize that the company is able to release their financial statement. But now it's a requirement in Kenya. Every company has to release its sustainability report every financial year, and also attach in the financial statement report. What is sustainable report? Well, sustainable reporting is contain the financial information in it and also non-financial information in it. When you talk about non-financial information, this is more so the social, environmental activities that the company are involved in, and also human rights. Currently, and also globally, we have an issue about LGBTQ. This is an issue of human rights, and they are part of the company organization. What are the company doing there about the LGBTQ employees they have in the organization? These are some of the things that the company needs to report in their reports. Companies sustainable report to illustrate the impression, ability, and the responsibility for the economy and what they are doing? Are they responsible? Are they corporate citizens, whatever they are doing? Why this report? Why did we do this study? There's 3 lessons that are major one that we did this study. One, disclose the information about the socio, economic, and environment so that we can see the performance toward promoting sustainable development in the country, more so in Kenya, and this report can be adapted in other countries. And also, as an act of publicizing information about how companies are able to contribute to sustainable development through ESG, and finally ensure opportunity are open to entity and full exploit and risk. You find some organization face some risk because of lack of implementing SG report they have in their places. And if they're able to implement the SG reports, they're able to mitigate this risk. What is our reasoning? We had the reasoning when we were doing this report. The first reasoning was to investigate the impact of expenditure. What is the company expenditure on SG compared now with non-SG compliance companies? And also assess the impact of expenditure on social activities. In Kenya right now, we have many organizations. They are not so much in marketing. They are giving more of their resources to SG. For example, we have Equity Bank. They are doing what through partnership with MasterCard. They are giving scholarship from secondary school to university. This is a part of it where they are able to support the community where they operate. The other companies for Stanbic Bank, they are doing tree planting. The government of Kenya has a target of 1.4 billion tree planting. So you have some companies that are coming on board in tree planting. These are some of the areas that we're able to assess what are the impact they're having. And finally, we're able to evaluate the expenditure on environmental activities of these organizations. From our picture here, we can see this is a fraction company in one of the, I don't name the company, but in Kenya, but we can see its waste is going to the river. This river is going downstream and people somewhere else are consuming this water. People are using the water for cooking, they're using the water for bathing, they're using water for their home use. So what do you expect for this to happen to those families in this area? Issue of carcinogenic gases will be there, and also some diseases will come out of this. Our methodology, we restricted more so on our study on manufacturing farms in Kenya, and the study we did it in 2015 to 2021, that's the study period. And we observed the trend of the subject matter in those years. The study was conducted through the descriptive research design, and our aim was to investigate the sustainability reporting and performance of the selected farms. The target population, we targeted 1,044 companies in Kenya, but our sample was 286 respondents. So these are the sample size, which was 25%, and we felt this is good representation of our sample size. The quantitative data in this research was analyzed using SPSS analysis version, which you're able to analyze, and the statistics including the mean frequency, standard deviation, and percentage of a profile. Our data was able to be represented in this form of table and charts and graphs. Unfortunately, due to time, I'm not able to present on that. And then we had variant regression model was applied to determine the relevant importance of each of the 3 variables. And we can have a formula there, which we use to analyze this. Then from our outcome, we're able to see only 198 respondents were able to respond and return their questionnaire contribution to 69.3%. This rate we also felt is a good rate that we're able to make our conclusion from it. Then 65.4% of respondents indicate the social disclosure affected the financial performance of their company extent. So if they're able to disclose it, 65% felt that they're able to get the impact on their financial. Then deducted that, then deduce the stakeholders' role affect the financial performance of the company, and we get in a great way, there's community in it. So we find that if a company is able to disclose, the community have more trust in it and able to work with them. And then finally have the issue about stakeholder engagement or humanitarian aid. And this brings more so to what we call corporate social responsibilities. If a company is able to disclose, you'll be able to have more as CSR in the organization. From this picture now we can find these are a group of employees and these are special community LGBTQ. And we found that most of the companies we were able to do a sample. They didn't have any policy on LGBTQ. One thing they argued is that in Kenya, LGBTQ policy is not legal. LGBTQ is not legal in the country. So they don't have any policies in them. And there is the LGBTQ community among them, but they're not able to give them the opportunity because it's not a law in the Kenya. But now you find we have foreign investors, especially for the listed companies. We had those foreign investors are coming. They're able to look what proportion do you give to the LGBTQ community? Which do you have LGBTQ rights in your organization? So all these companies lack this. They didn't have it in their policy. And the main conversation disclosure for the financial performance of sector company was so great. So most of the companies discuss more on the environment, what they are doing on the environment. They're able to disclose. And also they're able to use what we call recycling and using of water. We find especially use of solar energy. They're able to recycle the water they're using for their irrigation and other purposes in the organization. Profitability and asset base and liquidity of the company had greatly improved. This company that were reporting, we find that their probability increased compared to those who are not reporting. And then sustainable reporting disclosure affected the company return on investment. So we encourage more companies to do disclosure of their sustainable report so that we can see better ROI. What do we require for us to achieve this? Companies should stimulate local cultures and education to the public. Yes, the community they operate in, they are not aware about what is happening with the sustainability. They should stimulate and educate the local community, and the regulator, most of the capital market authority in Kenya and other market areas and other areas, we should we come with a guidelines and ensure the compliance. Yes, in Kenya already we have a compliance. We came up with a compliance where every organization listed in the market and which are coming on board through IPO and other all kind of channels, they should have those reports and have a policy on it. Companies should provide information of non-financial matters, and this increases transparency. What the company, even if employees coming on board, even if investors coming on board, what non-financial statements matters are you bringing on board or you have as a company? Companies should also communicate internationally, economic guidelines. Yes, we have the international economic guidelines. The company should come out with the guidelines and the policy they're able to implement in the organization. And finally, companies should increase their environmental awareness and involvement. Yes, it's only just only doing it. Let them disclose and also create their involvement. And finally, manufacturing companies should weight non-financial benefits. What non-financial benefits they are getting? Not they're getting the profits. The other benefits they are coming. For example, they are good corporate governance, good corporate citizens in their countries by having sustainable reporting. In short, what are we saying? Significant relationship exists between economic disclosure and financial performance. Those companies that disclosure, their performance are doing well. And also, sustainable reporting have positive impact on the financial performance of the company. And finally, the governance disclosure has no significant impact on financial performance of manufacturing company. Why? I find because in the country, the issue of governance, even the government, there's not so much taken care of. So we find that the governance, people, even the citizens don't care about the governance about it. And further research need to be done more so on other areas. More so, I would recommend the banking sector, another sector that can be able to run more on this. And finally, on the policy making perspective on this, immersive benefits has come out of it. One, the regulatory authority, the capital market authority, professional body, ISPAC, and other regulation professional bodies have come on board and able to implement through their membership. You need to implement these policies as a member of the organization. Then you have the host community. The host community are able to know about their rights as a community. The issue, for example, we have seen about pollution in the river and other pollution to the environment. Now the community is able to know about it. Aid management of various organizations, more so on the sustainability guidance. In the past, we had seen that the companies will give some aid to the community as form of giving back. And this is not what's required. We require to have some impact on it. When you give aid, it doesn't give any impact to the community. And the other thing, this will help the future researchers who might dig deeper on the subject matter. More need to be done on this matter that we need to do in it. Inform other companies that are yet to adopt SMME reporting. Now we need to educate them and see what is the benefit of having the financial reporting in the organization. So the challenges in the financial reporting policy. The practice and sustainable report is not common in Kenya. We have just said it. We're only 5 years old in sustainable reporting, so it's not common in Kenya, and so most companies are not to report. And regulatory bodies do not give it as a matter did not mandate the organization to produce sustainable report. So you find apart from the capital market authority, the other regulatory bodies, central bank, and the rest are not given as a regulator as a mandate to do it. In my closing remarks, if a company wants to maintain survival, it has to take care of 3 P's. The first P is to take care of the profits they are making. It must take care of the people, and it must take care of the planet. If a company will take care of the 3 P's, the company will be able to survive and be more sustainable in the area of operating. Asanteni sana for listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to all our experts, both in industry and academia. And I'll just abuse my position as the chair. So we're going to have 3 questions within the room, and then we also have questions online. So recently I was in India and I got to see a couple of institutions. One of them was India Institute of Madras. And part of their PhD program built in is for your PhD to be turned into a startup company. And the universities have a TTO on the University Technology Transfer Office. And so they literally from day one, from academia, encouraged and have the tools. And most of them have actually started their startups. And so I also think it's always important, even from the academia, the industry, and the government to work together for small business participation and adaptation. So we'll take some questions, 3 in the room to all our speakers, and then 3 online. And you can press the mic on the table. So
Thanks.
you can introduce yourself and which organization you're from, and you can proceed.
Go ahead. My name is Rendani Mampiswana. I'm from Napasi Water in the University of Johannesburg. My question is for Erica. Thanks for the presentation. It was great to hear perspectives from design thinking. So I've got a question around when design thinking is applicable and when it's not. I think in the theory space, we understand that every framework, every theory has got boundaries. So in terms of this, and I want to use an example around when we had let's say the Nokia phones came to BlackBerry, iPhone, where you first of all had 3 buttons for every letter. You went for a button per letter, then you went to a touch screen. If we ask a customer then, when with a Nokia phone, what they want, they wouldn't know what was next. And my view is perhaps the concept of the design thinking might have been limited. And I'm also saying this because I don't fully embrace the concept, but I'm really just wondering around when is it applicable, when it's not. I think that becomes important for practitioners to know when to use the concept or not to use it. Otherwise, then they get into trouble. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question? 2 more? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. And my question is directed to the last presenter from Kenya. Of course, you talked about the aspect of green evolution. My question is, how can Kenyan manufacturers navigate the risk or the threat of climate change in order to deliver that outcomes for green revolution? Those outcomes also include the aspect of sustainable growth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other question in the room? All right, we'll allow you to respond, and then I'll read one question we received online.
Yeah, to answer that question, I think it's a very good question. I'm not actually a sort of disciple of design thinking. I mean, I think it is a very useful approach to use in particular for particular things and at particular points. I think it is useful when you are in a very complex environment, and the answers are not clear, and there are many kind of role players where you're trying to understand in a way what's going on in the system, and you're trying to actually understand where there's a clear sort of a problem or a need that you're trying to address. So I think it's one way of looking at a problem and trying to solve a problem. I don't think it is the only way. And I think in for me, why it was a sort of important framing in this environment is because we're doing so much and we're not getting it right all the time. And I mean, I think maybe I must also, obviously things do work, and not everything is not working. So it was like I was really trying to grapple with what is the problem? Why are we not actually hitting the mark? Why we spend huge amounts of money in institutions and in practices to support small businesses? They've been part of a focus on a policy for decades, and we're not moving the dial. So it really was like, okay, well, maybe if we changed, like literally I was asking the question, if we changed our user orientation and our user focus, might we come up with a different approach? So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, sir, for that question. Sorry, I didn't remember your name. I didn't mention your name.
Yeah, sorry I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Kiru Sichongwe from the South African Research in Industrial Development. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Well, in the country, in Kenya, the government has come with several policies on how to mitigate climate change. One, the current government has given us a policy or directive that by year 2030, we need to plant 10 billion trees. And the companies have been able to one way, the government has given the companies run. Any company that want run, the government will give them free run to plant the trees, government run that is, to print the trees. And this has made the companies to implement more so of the government directive. The other thing, the government has made us, in producing energy, nowadays we have over 70% of our energy is clean energy. We do geothermal energy. In fact, Kenya is the biggest producer of wind power and solar energy and geothermal in Africa. So right now we are reducing hydro energy. So the government has encouraged the manufacturers to start using geothermal and solar manufacturing. The other thing the companies are doing is involving the stakeholders where they operate, their employees, their customers, and they're able to educate them more on how to improve the climate and mitigate climate changes in the area. Another thing they have made, reduce emission of green gases. This has been done through the government directive, that if a company is emitting certain level of greenhouse gases and also green emission gases, their license through the NEMA, National Environmental Management Authority, is revoked. So these are some of the areas that made it the government of the day and also the companies to mitigate the climate change. Another thing that they need to do better on this is, instead of involving the stakeholders, to have more action-oriented, and whenever they are bringing more company on board, they should start from there. The company should come with zero green emission of gases. And also, another thing, the company should have a clear policy on climate mitigation policy, which are yet to be done. But with time, we'll be having clear on that. Thank you. I hope you're able to answer the question.
Thank you very much. Ndirangu, while you're on it, there's a question that came online. And this is from Kefa Simoyu. And they're asking, for your research, is the data captured according to the time of the research or according to the enterprises, when the enterprises were established? And then with the questionnaires shared for the years 2015 to 2021, or others, or some other specific time period.
Thank you, Kefa, for that question. The research period was 2015, 2021. And because this was in collaboration with the Capital Market Authority, where we came up with a policy after 2021, we came up with a policy on implementing of sustainable reporting. That's a study period. We have not done another study on that. But as we go on with the collaboration with the Capital Market Authority, we are going to do another report on see the growth of this and how the company are implementing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll throw back to the people in the room. I haven't received any more questions online. Yes, sir.
Really, I'm Christoph from the Entrepreneurial Planning Institute. I'm really intrigued by Erica's focus on the aggregators. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Erica, but what's the solution for us then? If we're working on a, we've mentioned this before too here today, on an ecosystem, creating an ecosystem through which small businesses can thrive. And aggregators are then a key element in that ecosystem. How can we fix the problem that these programs not always have the impact? How can we capacitate the aggregators, organizations that are supporting the entrepreneur?
Okay, so I don't have the answer. But I think in reality, the aggregators aren't really supported. If I think about our experience as an institution, we constantly are actually fighting for survival. And I think there is something about the relationship. Who should public sector and big institutions be relating to? Should they be relating directly with the SMEs, which is the current environment? And I think that comes from an industrial policy environment that focuses on big business or more established sectors. So it's easier for them to engage with government. But if I think about our Jobs Fund project, just as an example, we've worked in fact with 270 SMEs through 3 various Jobs Fund projects. I don't think any of those individual SMEs would have been able to engage with the Jobs Fund directly or with the state directly. So we functioned as a handshake or as an intermediary. I mean, there's no other word for it, between the sort of this big institution of the Jobs Fund that is actually, I mean, it's a really well-run program, but it is very administratively heavy. The reporting requirements, just everything that is required to be accountable to that system, we absorb that as an organization. If the SMEs were to deal with that directly, they would run away. They would walk away. But the impact that we've had, so the businesses that we supported have created hundreds of jobs, and they've become more profitable. They've become more commercially viable. So I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but I think for me the answer really is support the intermediaries. If you had 100 organizations like us working in the creative sector, and I meant to make this point, but I forgot, is that we treat craft and design as a verb. It's not a product. So we are cross-cutting. Our members are in furniture, and they're in light manufacturing. They are in footwear and fashion. They're in jewelry. They're in soft furnishings. If we had 100 organizations like us around the country, I think we would be making a significant difference. So I think, yeah, maybe I've answered the question a little.
Thank you very much, Erica. Any other questions? All right, we have a few minutes before lunch, so I have one question, and then the panels are free to conclude and we can have lunch. And this is to Dale with the case of Distell. Was Distell or any other companies also looking into other materials? For example, I know you said glass making and bottling is highly energy intensive. Are there other materials they use which are like biomaterials, maybe?
Packaging.
Yeah.
Packaging, but the most significant and a lot of think tanks saw was the bottling process. So that was the main focus because it uses direct carbon. So yeah, that was the bottling process. But packaging, in scope 2, it will also be transportation. So the companies are going to be hit hard with general operation. So transportation of the wines, and various different other activities. But for now, it was just the carbonating of those bottles, you know. The most important thing with that, with scope 2, is that it's not just going to impact big business, it's going to impact everybody. And with CBAM as well, it's going to be like this double whammy situation. So we're going to be taxed domestically, environmentally, and then also at the borders. And CBAM is something we cannot ignore. And the playing field's not really level with the carbon tax policy because not every country's adopted it. So there's a lot of carbon leakages currently happening. And that's the threat for our businesses here, where big companies actually move out of the country, go to countries like India where there's less stringent. So that was something that was very alarming for me, especially in light of what we are trying to do, especially within the forum, within a policy perspective. And another thing, the carbon tax policy, many people see it as a fiscal policy, but it's actually an industrial policy. It's designed to change people's way of thinking or their way of doing things, nudging them in the right direction, but also to better certain sectors. And I think that's where we're going wrong with the policy currently. But as it's been rolled out, time will tell. Is that your question?
Thank you very much. Any concluding remarks from our presenters? No. We have one more question, yes.
Questions for Erica. Erica, I actually just remembered something. In the earlier section, that where it was found that there's actually a relationship, a positive correlation, having like a formal qualification that's applied to all business. Is that something that you found that when it comes to the more qualified or educated, the people give some, the more this comes from earlier when you highlighted that, because I'm also trying to understand what is going wrong with it. We have all these programs, no impacts. You have SEDA, you have SEPA, you have IDC, you have, but what seems to not be working, you know, because it's financial. You have, you know, institutions. If it's like admin and technical skills, you have like your SEDA and whatever. So what exactly would be going wrong? It seems like it's one of those what's going wrong in the education system type of question, but what is it that's really not working?
Okay, so I mean, I have some thoughts. I'm sure there are lots of other opinions in the room. I think it makes sense to me, and from my experience, that a formal qualification makes it easier for businesses to thrive. But I don't think it's just about the education. I think what comes with formal education, confidence, access to networks, some, you know, technical skill and knowledge is obviously important. So again, in the creative industries, I could see a difference between designers who are coming through a formal tertiary education system with a design qualification. They're able to engage in a much more sort of articulate way with their business than somebody who doesn't have that formal training. But somebody without that formal training can also make those strides. So it's not a make or break. I think it's just harder. And I think then that's where the question of what is the support in the environment, how important that is, because, and I think Neva had in her presentation, she spoke about a whole lot of elements in the environment, and how much of that was actually shattered by apartheid. But that's what we need to be reproducing. So it's not just about the access to finance, it's about all of the soft things that are going on in an environment where an entrepreneur is working, as well as the hard things, like if people are based in a township, do they have access to sort of industrial parks, you know, where they can run a business or a small manufacturing company. Transport, you know, all of those things obviously impact on those businesses as well. I think I've sort of answered your question. I feel like there was another part of the question, but yeah.
Thank you so much, colleagues. We've reached the end of our session. Please join us after lunch for more presentations as well as tomorrow. And a big round of applause to all our presenters.